Right. Recording in progress. Hello, Mick Stott.
Hello.
How are you?
Long time no chat, Karen.
Yeah, long time no chat. You all right?
I'm really good, yeah. Yeah, really good.
It's good to see you. How's Vicky?
She is phenomenal.
Oh,
She's working at the moment, shaping all of our foundations in terms of T's and C's, working documents, just making sure that we're ready to roll as we start to look for venues.
I might be able to help you for Spectrum. Let's come
Yeah,
on to that in a minute because you and I we're long overdue a catch up, aren't we? Really?
sure,
I
yeah.
think we became buddies at the beginning of all this weird stuff that kicked off in 2020.
Yeah.
And you've been the founder, I guess, of Guardians 300, and I think that's what
Mm,
met you when you first launched it. I remember we went up to I met you in Manchester. There was probably a mutual friend who I've lost touch with, Luke Scott the third or something. He had numbers after his name, and he organised our first conference, and that's why I met you. And you brought me to tears, actually, Mick, because
oh,
I
wow.
knew, well, the world was being turned upside down, and you saying, well, there's lots of us, we're coming to the rescue, like the cavalry, like Mr. Trump, haha. And I was just so happy that other people know what was going on and were doing stuff, trying to sort the world out. So hat goes off to you for setting up
Well,
Guardian.
we trained about 90 trainers, Karen.
Yeah, I know.
We've worked out now that we must have easily influenced, trained directly, indirectly, in excess of 150,000 people.
Amazing. And right at the
And
beginning as well, and where that has led, it's gone all over. It's gone all it's like mycelium, isn't it? It's like when I sit up the Freedom Network, not the same as what you're doing, but it was just a way of people finding each other and doing whatever needs to be done in the
yeah,
chaotic paradigm in which we find ourselves, which is going to
mm,
be, I wonder if it's going to be more interesting with Mr. T. I don't know if it's going to have a knock-on effect over here, but I'm sure it will. So exciting times ahead. But you've
yeah.
diversified, you've moved a little way aside from that, haven't you? And you're doing something called Spectrum. Should we talk? No, before we do that, let's just talk about, if we may, why I think we need to have this conversation, which is kind of about, I think it's about relationships within this movement, if it's called the freedom movement, within the world in which we live, the people that know what's going on.
Yeah.
People are falling all out, aren't they? They're tripping up over each other. They're stabbing themselves in the back. They're stabbing each other in the back. What's going
Mhm.
on? What is happening here?
A lot of people don't understand perception. They don't
Mhm.
understand the shadows, and a lot of people within the organization say, "Oh yeah, I'm working with my shadow," but a lot of them don't have a tool to do that with, Karen. So when I say to them, "How do you get past your own shadow?" There's no real answer to that. And of course, what we teach when people come on our programs is how to calibrate. Calibrate means take your own opinion out of an interaction so that you can measure facts. Because if I have an opinion of another person, we measure people through our own filters, which are our values, our beliefs, and our perspective, our perception. And of course, we're always going to be right, but essentially, our opinion becomes part of how we measure our world. And of course, if I've experienced, let's say, bullying, the worst people to train people in bullying is the ones that have been bullied but have never resolved it.
Yeah,
They can often even see it when it doesn't exist because the
yeah,
mind is such a powerful thing. So essentially, what people are doing are really they're seeing their own shadows and they're not accepting that it's their own shadow. And it's naturally going to be the other person. And then when we believe we have a perspective, we look for company to know that we're right.
absolutely. It's very hard to humble ourselves and say that we made a mistake or we don't get it, or just to step back and try and learn more information. I think with
Oh, oh,
also with
yeah.
what's happened over these last few years, with all the people that we've tried to save by saying don't take a certain, intervention, and we've saying because it's not going to do you any favors. Many people realize we were right, but many people will not say, "Oh God, you were right. I'm sorry," or "Thank you." They just can't
Totally.
bring themselves to accept what is going on, and it's a difficult thing. So when we talk about the shadow, can you just explain, because some people might not really get what you're talking about to the shadow. What do you mean when we say the shadow? Deal with your stuff.
So a great way to look at it. I looked at a model called Johari window, and it was
Yeah.
a model that when I've delivered adventurous training or I've gone to develop someone, then they'll often come up and say, I'm fantastic at this. And I'll say, okay, prove it. So we now want to see something we can observe that proves they've got the knowledge, they've got the skill. We can test knowledge easily with a theory test. We can observe skill just by what somebody does, and if they do it well, then they're skillful, and if they don't do it well, they're not skillful. But they'll produce a set of behaviors. And of course, what I then do, my job is if they're not as good as they think they are, then I've got to find out why. And this was the whole premise of Johari. Johari, what they said was, how could somebody possibly think they're great at something when they're not that great? Well, there are 4 quadrants to Johari. The first one is the bit that when I meet people, I'll hold a conversation and I'll keep some things to myself because I don't really tell everyone about myself. And there's nothing sinister about that. None of us really do that. So there's some things that we know about ourselves that other people don't know.
Mm.
And then there's another quadrant to the window, which is that you might meet me and you might think, I know some stuff based on what I've measured, and Mick isn't aware of that. So that's known to others, but not self. And those are 2 quadrants of the Johari window. Now, the most interesting elements of Johari, the first interesting element is the video. So have you ever seen yourself on a video is a question I would ask people. And I would ask, do you sound the same? Do you look the same? And the answer to that is always no. No, I don't. Because we hear our own inner voice. We know why we do everything that we do. But do we really know who we are to others? Because the only way to know that sometimes is through feedback. But even feedback can be a problem if it's not calibrated or measured, because it can be a projection, right? So the video, what we say is, well, okay, so you can be a million miles away from your video. You can think you're fantastic at something, but your video, when you start to see it, you start to then see evidence that it's not the way you thought it was. And this is literally a journey of, I'm unconsciously incompetent. So I don't really know I'm not so good at something. And now the coach is sort of going, well, you're not so good at this, and let's prove it. And now I'm consciously incompetent. So now this is the dodgiest bit, because this is where you have to pretty much address who you are. And of course, when you're addressing who you are, because it's behavioral, sometimes we don't like what we see. If you go into prison, the biggest challenge in prison is everyone's innocent. Does that make sense? No one did it. And it's because they might actually have to address a part of themselves that they really wouldn't want to believe about themselves. So that would smash their sense of self.
Yeah.
Because most people do have like an ideal self, and this is what the video is about. So I might have this ideal perspective of myself, and then when you tell me, Mick, you're a bit aggressive, I might go, bloody hell, didn't think I was aggressive. I'm really sorry about that. But that might hurt me to even think that. And I might not want to embrace that. So some people have the epiphany that they're not this ideal person, but they never do anything about it. The clever ones change it.
Oh,
And so when we change that, say again.
bring it 1 second. Sorry, somebody knocked on the door. So I'm just going to pause this for 1 moment.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so sorry about that disturbance. My dog started barking. So say that again. We're talking about the video.
Yeah, so the video, I could be a long way off my video. Anyone that's watched X Factor or any of those types of things, you can get somebody that literally can stand on stage, sing away, and believe they're totally in tune and that they're fantastic. And irrespective of all the booing that's going on in the audience, because that's feedback, by the way, they still leave the stage thinking they're amazing and they should have won.
Yeah.
And that's called dissonance. So that's a level of denial. And of course, when you have an ideal self, when someone shows you that you're not as great as you think you are, the bigger the gap, the bigger the shock. But equally, the bigger the gap, the bigger the resistance. Make sense?
Yeah.
But if I'm elegant in my feedback and I can absorb feedback and I can, and when I work with young people, that's why I always give them proof of how great they are or what needs to be developed. Yeah. Because what you do is you make that journey of awareness a little bit softer, a bit more gentle. Yeah. So once we get in touch with our video, we become astute. And the thing that influences our video is the fourth quadrant of the window, which is literally the blind spot. Now, the blind spot is the bits we don't know about ourselves and no one else knows. And you know you have a blind spot because if there's anything that you react to emotionally, it's part of your blind spot. Any reaction. And the
Yeah,
thing that
triggers
might
you.
get us to react is a situation or a person because they both become mirrors, Karen.
Mirror,
And they're
yeah.
mirrors for your blind spot. Go on.
Well, yeah, mirror. That's the thing, isn't it? I always think of Michael Jackson as well. You know, with his song, take a, look at yourself in the mirror, and because we are reflections of each other. Because again, we're all connected. And now you've talked about
Well,
the
you know, you
visual.
take this to an advanced level, Karen. If you take this to an advanced level, you actually, love will blind you just the same way that hate will because of the limitations of perspective.
Mm,
So if I love somebody, I've got to ask myself, what are they showing me that's in me? Equally, if I hate somebody, what are they showing me that's in me that's unresolved?
yeah.
Of course, people don't get that
No.
because it's natural to blame. And if you're blaming, you are not owning. Any
So
reaction I get from any environment, Karen, the first thing I ask is, how did I create the environment? And what is it in me that needs to be resolved for me to be different in that environment?
it's a lesson, isn't it? There's a lesson in
Yeah.
everything. I mean, and that's how we learn through relationship. And whoever that relationship is, whether it's the busman, the postman, your neighbor, knocking on the door. If that triggers me, I could have got annoyed because he didn't know I was doing a Zoom, but he's just disturbed it. It's a reaction, isn't it? And it's your perception of what's going on in the world in your relationship and how you deal with it. And I think all this shadow work comes from Jung, doesn't it? Who
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
the
it's Jungian.
yeah, a student of Freud. I always want to say Clement Freud, but it's Sigmund Freud. Clement Freud was the guy with the dog, wasn't he? Don't know many Freuds.
Yeah, but he's his great grandson, isn't he? Or, I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating stuff. So what do you think? I mean, this is all linked to the work that you're doing, and I also want you, please, Mick, to say what is your background. Let's do that as well, so that people who may not have met you before or know your name know where you're coming from. You're not just some bloke off the street that I've just phoned up and said, what do you
Yeah,
think?
totally. I get that. I mean, I come from a military background. I was a martial artist before I joined the military. At the age of 16 and a half, 17, I became the North of England karate champion. One of the reasons I joined the military was for my karate, so that I could be sponsored by the military. And then when I joined, and I served 30 years, when I joined, I realized there was a lot more out there, and that sort of let go of karate, but went down different avenues. So I spent 30 years in the military. My main role was analysis of training, implementation, validation, and amendment of training, and of course that was about preparing people mentally and physically to war fight essentially
Yeah.
in the army. So I was in the Army Physical Training Corps, and I resigned my commission in 2004. Maintained a number of roles at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst as the SO2 adventurous training, which might not mean anything to anyone because it's sort of military jargon. But essentially, they were senior appointments.
Yeah.
William and Harry, through their experiences, if I'd known them, would have known now. If only.
Have you got
but
their phone
but
numbers? You can always always pop round.
yeah. So the key thing is what I found towards the end of my career, I was looking at why people were failing.
Yeah.
And of course, we had a great behavioral model in the military. We had a great cognitive model in the military, but we didn't have an emotional model. And I realized that when people struggle, it's always emotion. I prepared and trained and mentored a number of international athletes, worked with rugby teams at international level, worked with some of the current England coaches in various ways without giving too much detail away.
Yeah.
But also, all of that has found me in so many different spaces. I created a system called Spectrum, and Spectrum was launched at the University of Central Lancashire in 2013. I spoke at the BACP National Conference in 2013 as
What's the
well,
BACP?
the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists.
Okay.
So I was a guest speaker at that conference because I was talking about how veterans receive treatment and how how we go about that, the best way to sort of to get them into therapy. And of course, so my system has found itself in many different arenas: high security prisons, women's refuges, birth trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the research that we did was from some very complex demographics. There were veterans that had comorbidities such as alcohol and drug dependencies. And these were the guys that have been written out of Health for Heroes and Combat Stress because they were drinking or using drugs. I was really concerned about those because if somebody writes you out of a program, where do you go from there? And then we wonder why we have the number of suicides that have been going on, which are all preventable, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's what Spectrum was about. So Spectrum was born in 2006. It evolved and continues to evolve and is now at a place where I believe it's about to fly. So that's where we're at, really.
So you're well versed, you're well experienced, you know what you're talking about, and you've had a few bumps and bruises on the way, which helps because that makes us what we are, doesn't it? They say that there's a thing about a diamond, isn't it? A diamond is a rock, and you know they have to bump and bruise it and scratch it to make it shiny.
And to be fair, we've been in the arena, Karen. So I've never sort of strayed away from the arena. The arena has been, well, let's get in there and prove what we say we do. Now, if only the mental health arena did the same, it might be more efficient, and it's not efficient.
Yeah.
You know, there are elements of the mental health system that are woefully inadequate. And you know, I was stood in Portcullis House years ago with David Cameron and Simon Weston, a friend of mine, and you know, they're all the professors were in there, and I remember standing up and asking them what they were professors of, which didn't make me popular. But if what we're doing is not working, what I could never get my head around was, well, why keep doing it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, just before we came and started recording this, you said you just made friends with John Galloway. Is that correct? Tell me.
George Galloway. Yeah, well, I joined the Workers' Party for the last election. I joined the Workers' Party because I wanted to know what it was like being in the political arena. George is the only man that's calling out Zionism, and he's calling it out in many shapes and forms. He's also calling out wokeism, which I totally agree. For me, you can be who the hell you want to be, but that shouldn't influence or force me to treat you differently. I don't go around telling people they need to treat me in a certain way. What I do is I let live and I live myself. So I treat people the way that I'd like to be treated myself, with respect. And equally, when that influence starts to step outside of its box, so we're now influencing young minds, for me, that's not about being gay or being lesbian or whatever it is. That's about grooming. And of course, I wouldn't be allowed to go into a school and tell kids my philosophy of life without parents' permission and without some level of guidance. Yeah. So for me, that's a step too far. And he calls out all of that. I'm totally on the page with him when it comes to war.
Yeah.
Having been there.
Yeah.
It is nothing but destruction. And when you learn who benefits from war and who creates it, that's a bit of an eye-opener as a soldier.
Yeah, and as a non-soldier, it's a bit of an eye-opener as well, because you know they're backing on to both sides. When you start looking and going down all these rabbit holes, it's quite horrific. The Zionism thing, we've got to be careful, haven't we? Because the word like anti-Semitic, I'm sure that's been manufactured like many of these things, because it's an excuse for a lot of people saying, oh, you don't like Jews, you're anti-Semitic, so then we don't say it. But Zionism and the Israelites, the Jews, it's a bit of a melting pot. Can you try and separate all this for people to let them know?
Well, I just think that if you understand some basics, so Zionism has been around a long time, and to be a Zionist, you don't need to be religious. So you can just be a Zionist because it's a political ideology more than anything, and it's about an elite class governing over a serf class. And there being a one world religion that suits all, which would never be the case. The world has not evolved in that way. You know, we look at Buddhism, we look at Christianity, we look at Muslims, we look at any of the other religions. Why shouldn't you be able to connect to whichever deity serves your purpose? Of course, the Zionist element of this. When you start to see that, when people like Liz Truss, I mean, she was the first person that went on video as the Prime Minister saying, I'm a Zionist. Boris Johnson's another one. his dad's another one. So when you start to look at the interconnectivity, you start to see it for what it is. I mean, I did a little bit more digging. You don't need to be religious at all to be Zionist. And what the Zionists did was they jumped on the back of the Judean Jew. And if you look at, it's very, very easy to quote and to shout anti-Semitism, because that's what they did. Who wants to be an anti-Semite? If you're a reasonable person, but it's reasonable people that they target. It's reasonable communities that they target, because reasonable communities don't want to offend. And this is why our values at the moment are being so stretched. But if you're really clear about it, a Judean Jew knew that they were in spiritual exile. A Judean Jew, and you can see these rabbis that are standing up for the Judean Jews and saying, we are not state-driven. We're not interested in the state of Israel. They recognize that wherever their holy book is, that is their home. So they can be Swedish Jews, they can be English Jews, they can be Pakistani Jews, they can be whatever they want to be, based on where their holy book is. Of course, Zionism is not about that. Zionism is simply about that political class. And that's what we're seeing unfold. It's no surprises that when you look at who funded the Conservatives and the Labour, the Labour strategies for the general election, they were funded by the lobby of Israel, the Israel lobby. So I mean, if you look at Israel per se, it doesn't matter what you believe in. If you're a human being, if you are a soul, it is against your soul to kill another soul, to kill another human being. It is against your soul's essence. And Zionism wants you to believe you don't have one. If you look at the likes of Noah Yuval Harari and you go to Davos, which is basically the home of all of this stuff, it's the meeting point, the blurs. The blur is a war criminal. That's accepted. Even within the ranks of the troops, Karen, Blur is not respected on any level. I could show you video after video, testimonial. I've sat with thousands of veterans now at the level of post-traumatic stress disorder, and how they speak about Blur is who he is. He is a war criminal.
And so he looks evil. His eyes, they look demonic, don't they, Tony Blair?
Totally. Well, the thing is, you can't be nice, Karen, and it not show on your face.
No.
You can't be evil and it not show on your face. And if you're lying, as the Zionist element does, it always shouts anti-Semitism, because that's the big thing now that we can put in at the level of hate speech and all of this stuff, but really has no foundations. So when you consider that, these are all the little strategies that they use. I mean, if you look at Israel per se, like I was saying, any soldier doesn't want to kill anyone. A real warrior never wants to go into battle. A real warrior is a balance of the male and the feminine. They are people that have humanity at their heart. When I served in Bosnia, I fed more kids from our leftover rations than you could shake a big stick. Now I'm getting told by the main man at the division, if you get caught, you'll lose your pension. And I said, well, I don't really give two hoots, to be honest, because my humanity is what it is. And of course, when people want you to believe that you don't have that, there's a purpose in that. Noah Yuval Harari is nothing but demonic and evil. And he's not that bright, actually. He's only bright to people that aren't open-eyed and read enough in the arena that he wishes to talk in. So I could spend 10 minutes with Noah Yuval Harari and I'd rip him apart at the level of his concept of spirit, because he hasn't met enough people or actually been objective enough in his perspective and experience to take his blinkers off. So when he talks about other people, he's another one that's dealing with his dark spaces.
And it is all about dark spaces, because here we are saying we're all one, we're all connected, and we all have a shadow side and a dark side. So, do we love these people even though they're evil? Does our higher consciousness and our spiritual side, where we've got to love and embrace these people because they are a part of us? How do we deal with that when we know, the damage that they are doing?
Well, you can love somebody that's about to mug you with a knife. The fact is, they're about to mug you with a knife. You can love them until you're blue, but that might not work in that space. It's all relative to the space. The reason that the conflict resolution model was created in law was to say that if I believe you're going to kill me, I can use equal force to stop you. It's even a Buddhist principle that if I believe you're going to do something that's not in your interest spiritually, then I should stop you from doing that because it's not in your interest. I personally believe that you should have access to a full set of behaviors and you are entitled to defend yourself. And equally, that doesn't mean that you have to wait for somebody to attack you. If you believe that that's going to happen, you're within your rights to defend yourself.
And
So,
but then what do you do with the perpetrator, the person that's holding the knife that wants to stab you? What do you do with them? Do you put them through your spectrum course? Do you lock them away? Do you chop their heads off? I mean, how do we deal with these people? Because then, is the time coming where the tide has turned and we're gonna, we're after these?
well, Alfred had a great idea, didn't he? If you look at Alfred when he said, "Cause no harm, loss, injury, and be
Mm,
honourable in your contract." I mean, ultimately, the first thing I would say is let's make sure that they are guilty. And of
yeah,
course, that's down to trial by jury, which is a fair system, not like the current system, which is completely flawed and completely has been bastardized to produce money and to make money and to support itself, in so much that it is a bit of a self-licking lollipop, really. Um, but if you took it back to basics, um, first, once we confirm that this person is guilty, then they receive the punishment that they should receive based on that deliberation. And of course, if I'm prepared to take someone's life, then I should pay the price for that, whatever that's deemed to be. I personally don't believe in killing people.
no,
I think the moment we do capital punishment, and this is only my belief, it's not as easy as people think it is. And people often have the reality at somebody's death, when somebody's just about to die, whether you hate them or whether you love them, in that moment when their life is slipping away, you have a realization, and it's never a positive one. And anyone that has killed someone, I can guarantee with the people I've spoken to and a lot of the work that I've done, none of them are proud of it. So why is that? That for me is a very simple truth. It's almost an offense against your own soul, because irrespective of whether you've done it in anger, you've defended yourself, you can justify it in that way, of course. And it is still an interaction that will never serve you at the level of happiness. And war zones are full, they are devoid of love. They're just
yeah,
devoid of love. Yeah.
yeah. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible what's going on and what has gone on over the years. Just talking about spirituality, I'm going to put a cat amongst the pigeons here. I've just been watching the other day a film. It is a lot. It's a film. It's not a 10 minutes little video. It's about an hour and 40 minutes called Christspiracy, and it's been made by the guys that wrote Cowspiracy, and it's really worth watching. And it
Mm.
talks about spirituality. And somebody one of I don't know, it was a debate of somewhere. I think the guy that wrote, I don't know the names, the guy that written Cowspiracy had a debate with a bunch of people, and a young man stood up and said, how would Jesus kill an animal? And it was very controversial. So then they spent the next 7 years going around the world talking to all the religious people, including the Dalai Lama and various Buddhists and yogis and stuff like that, because they're saying, and it went through the Bible and the Den of Thieves, and it was it is really worth a watch. But it talks about, if you're a spiritual person, do we have the right to kill animals? What's your play on that? Because I know you are a very spiritual man. I'm sorry to throw that one at you.
No, that's okay. I think there's a difference between being spiritual and being religious. So I've met lots of religious people that are not
Yeah,
spiritual, and
yeah,
I've met lots of spiritual people that are not religious. For me, the essence is the intention of what you do and how you carry it out, aligned with your own philosophy. If you're here as a spirit in a human cage and you're here to evolve, then there's a level of eradication of the rules that have been bestowed upon you. So for me, I get rid of human rules. I don't follow any human rules. We do live in societies where if you don't comply in certain things, then you're going to be up against it. I understand that, but they're not necessarily rules that stop me from evolving. So for me, any reactions that I have, and Victoria is very similar, any reactions that we have to situations, we get rid of those. Does that mean that we are anarchists? Yeah, probably does really on some levels, because in reality, anarchy doesn't mean anarchy, does it?
No,
So
no,
in
it
terms of
doesn't.
spirit, Karen, there are no leaders in this world.
No.
All the spiritual leaders are somewhere else. So for me, you follow your path. And as long as that path is cause no harm, loss, injury, and be honourable, which I think is abstract enough for anyone to operate within. Have I caused harm? Have I caused loss? Have I done? Of course I have, because I'm a human. I'm here in this human form, but essentially my essence is that I'm a spirit looking to evolve, and the only way to evolve in my world is to recognize anything that react to. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. And that all comes from one simple thing, and it's a basic truth. It's you telling your truth. So for me, it all starts with a real basic truth. And that truth might offend. So what you learn to do then is communicate your truth in such a way that it's not offensive, but it's truthful. And it has to be an absolute truth. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that if I'm fearful, my truth is around fear. But if I get rid of the fear, my truth becomes about something else. So truth is an ever-shifting platform. If you're in if you're in the world of learning and evolution, and anyone that is truly spiritual will be in the world of learning and evolution. Are we going to make some mistakes? Yeah. If I had a pound for every mistake I'd made, I'd be rich. I'd be very wealthy. And the beauty of this journey, Karen, is I can think that I'm this legend in spirit, but I might be 10 yards behind you. And the beauty of spirit is I don't know that. So once you become aware of Dharma, karma, you have no excuses. You run out of excuses other than literally owning the sum total of what you think, feel, do, and project.
Yeah.
For me, the quality of your life spiritually is based on what comes to you. And of course, whatever I attract is a way of letting me know where I am on my journey. And I don't know where I am in relation to anyone else. So I'm not in a position to say I'm ahead of them or even behind them.
Yeah.
And I think if you're that philosophical and you're purposeful in what you do with that, you'll never really put a foot wrong. But the thing that confuses it all is perception and perspective.
Yeah. And the thing is, like you said, or you alluded to, it's about a choice, isn't it? We all have a choice, and we might not like the options, but as we've just experienced over the last few years, a lot of us that didn't take the intervention, but a lot of us did. We wanted to go on holiday or keep the job. It still came down to a choice. So it's interesting time to be alive. Let's talk a little bit more about Spectrum then. So where are you with that? And tell us what it is.
Yeah, Spectrum is a tool that's been created it was created in 2004. Funnily enough, bizarrely enough, I named it at Tintagel in Merlin's Cave. I was drawn to Tintagel. Don't know why, but I was working at the Royal Marine Commando Training Centre, delivering training to Royal Marine Commandos, developing them as coaches, influencing the coach and advisory team, which was like a specialist team that helped the young commandos that couldn't quite make it. So instead of getting rid of them, they would nurture them, coach them, and get them back into a platoon where they would then put them back into training. So lives were time wasn't wasted really.
Yeah.
So it was born then, and of course it found its way into many different arenas. Spectrum is a tool that it's fair to say when someone has gone through life, they will have accumulated emotions such as anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, and anxiety, and they'll have accumulated those in different areas of their lives, of their life. They might not be aware exactly of where that is or the impact of the life on them, because awareness is a peculiar thing, really. We can often have an experience and not even know that experience has impacted on us in some way. And so we keep going through life, gathering all these experiences in our nervous system. And then for some, what happens is they get to a point where they step over a threshold and the nervous system sort of goes, I've been trying to tell you for years, mate, no, we're going to make you lie down, or no, we're going to give you a nervous breakdown. And so at that point, life comes to pay people a visit. Spectrum is fantastic at identifying what it is that comes to pay you a visit, and more importantly, changing it. And it does it incrementally, and it does it comprehensively. There's nothing out there like it, Karen, you know, and I can say that with my hand on my heart because I've trained in an awful lot of things, EFT, TFT, EMDR, IMT. So CBT is not even as effective as coaching. You get a great coach, they'll beat a CBTer every day of the week. I'm very aware of psychoanalysis. I've never really bought into the medical model outside of containing someone with chemicals because I believe that our body is its own medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
And if we unlock these emotions, you know, just like Dr. Bruce Lipton says, if our body is a petri dish and we can put positive stuff in there, our body can go into a healing state. If our body is a petri dish and we're doing nothing but put negative in there, it has to go into protection. And of course, it can't be in both. So if I spend more time in protection than I do in healing, then my body's going to speak my journey, right? So Spectrum's fantastic at getting rid of an awful lot of mind and emotional junk that allows your body to heal and get well, and also allows someone to elegantly move into the future.
How can people find out about it, Mick? If they want to get involved as a trainer or to go on a course?
Well, we train all of our own coaches. We have a lovely little cheapest chips program called the Happiness Accelerator, which is $49.99. And I've done that because there's a lovely little paradigm in there that's exceptionally powerful called the 5 questions. That doesn't exist in any other performance coaching model. And bear in mind, I introduced performance coaching to the British Army in 2003. It worked for about 60% of the people we were working with, but it didn't work for the ones that were traumatized. So I'm very well versed and able to speak about that kind of stuff. So that cheapest chips, $49.99, is about how can I engage with this without a massive investment? Because quite often you go to ILM or you go to NLP or you go to some of these other worlds, and they're not comprehensive. And I'm a master trainer of NLP, by the way, just in case anybody thinks that that's just a stab at NLP. It isn't on any level.
No.
It's got its utility, but it's also got some things that actually we need to stay away from. So it's a cheapest chips way of being introduced to a community to see, one, whether you even like it, or two, whether you want to engage with the community. And it's an online program with a little workshop that I do on Zoom, so that we can explain all of its bits and pieces, really. And then from there, someone can then do a level 1, level 2, level 3. The more you go up the scheme of awards, then that then certifies and qualifies you to work with more complex situations. Of course, a psychologist would say, well, you can't possibly do this unless you've been doing it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I go, rubbish.
Yeah.
We don't do psychology. We don't do what, we do how. And we don't get into the weeds of anybody's trauma.